Hello and welcome to the Half-Bryan Archives. Today I'm going to be explaining about the main world of Half-Bryan, which actually takes place on Solalant. Solalant is a small island located in the Pacific Ocean, which then is surrounded by smaller islands. Here's a photo of the Solalant. As you can see here, you got Severit, which is actually covering the west side of the island, and then on the east side of the island you have three small spots, which is called Niren, Malin, and Gruskia. Around the main continent of the island, starting from the top left, is the Immaculate island chain, which is actually occupied by the Altans, which is a Chinese type of group. On the opposite end of it is Relissa Island, which was actually occupied by the Pat Space Group eventually in the years to come. Down below is Roy Island, which was occupied by the Pat Space Group in 1928. Then heading to the opposite end, which is Lane Island, which is also occupied by the Pat Space Group in 1929. Right here is a circled area of the Immaculate island chain, which shows the occupation of the Altans. Here we show the occupation of the Narp Group. Where we see the red circles is where their base locations are at. Mainly they were occupied in Malin, which Malin is a jungle type environment. You can also see up in the Niren Desert, they also have a base up there. As for the Pat Space Group, they're all over the map. They have taken over Roy Island, Lane Island, they have a base down in Gruskia, and they also even have a base down in Malin. First base started off in Niren, which is located in between the Niren Mountains, which is also a desert area. You can also see the Pat Space Group occupied Relissa Island as well. As for Severit, Severit has just the whole entire west side of the island. Getting back to the Pat Space Group, I actually made small little episodes of the Pat Space Group in Europe, Germany, and such, where they actually take place in the World War II era. But I didn't want to include that with the Half-Bryan storyline, so I considered that as the small little offset episodes. The Pat Space Group also plays in another offset episode called Half-Bryan 3, which takes place in South America, Colombia, which actually is a live video that I made of that. Anyways, I actually kind of came up with the island, the way designed, the way I made it is because I actually wanted to have like all three type of climate zones, such as desert, temperate, and jungle type way, and also snow temperate. So I wanted to combine that all into one little island. And also I wanted to make it a made up island, so I'm not taking other islands such as, Europe and North America and South America. I didn't want to take up any of those kind of ideal ways, so I just wanted to make up my own little island. Getting back to Severit, Severit actually is kind of based off of England, if you would like to say, which actually Severit is connected to England, which, if you read in the storyline, it was like a group that England made. They wanted to send them over and create another style of England, which represented into Severit. So basically Severit came over in like the 1800s and took over Solalant, and that kind of caused a rebellion to happen, which is the reason why the title came up to Half-Bryan, because then you have the half splitting into the Solalant, and then you have Bryan in the mix, which he's the main character. You can even also see that the most of the Severit people actually have the English accent, which I can actually done with General Tom, as you can hear in his voice, and somewhat of the headmaster Marcus. So if you're actually wondering why they sound English, it's because Severit was based off of England. Getting back to the Narp Group, The Narp Group actually was started in Niren, which then they recruited people unwillingly to recruit, that is, such as Pat Morgan and Dr. Vallard Wakeman, and they were recruited into the Narp Group. Fortunately, though, the Narp Group moved down into Malin because they were actually forced down there for some apparent reasons, and they started building their facilities down in Malin jungle. After their Narp leader has died, a Russian GRU general came in, and he has taken over the Narp Group, which his name is General LeBurn, or as his full name, General Maximus LeBurn. Niren was actually pretty much a Russian settlement that came in pretty much around the 1800s as well, and they settled into Niren and pretty much civilized in that area. As for the Godaltans is an Asian type environment where pretty much Chinese settlement people have heading down into the Solalant area where they can break free from China, and they developed their group such as called as the Godaltans. Now the Godaltans are pretty much a peaceful type of group, which they later on get involved in the takeover, trying to eliminate Severit from the Solalant territory, which they also pretty much came down in the 1800s as well. Pretty much Solalant was a island that was found, and all these countries tried coming in to take over and make it their own. But then till England, Severit, came over and they wanted to take over the whole thing. But they later on figured that they would just split the island in half and they'll take the share as well. But the people that were already there were unsatisfied with the idea because Severit was getting the bigger half of the island, and they did not like that. So the Asians from the Godaltan group were actually forced to live on the Immaculate island chains, which was actually a very terrible thing for them, since the islands were not that big at all, and they later on started building their forces up, and they developed the Godaltan group. And finally, for the Pat Space Group, Pat Space Group was developed by a man called Pat Morgan, which he was actually called Corporal Pat in the Narp Group, which then later on he became known as Lead General Pat in the Pat Space Group. Lead General Pat also developed the Pat Space Group in 1927 secretly from the Narp Group. During the time of the building, the structure of the base was actually built in the mountain region of Niren, which was surrounded by mountains and also hidden from civilization. Fortunately, though, the Pat Space Group had no country of their own, which then later on they actually wanted to assume their own, so they actually took over Gruskia.